The Honourable Showket Musselman.
Mr. President, I give notice on next sitting day. I will move one, that this House notes A, Prime Minister Scott Morrison's attack on Islam and the blaming of the Muslim community for violence and killing on Friday 9 November in Burke Street, Melbourne, has been widely condemned as politically motivated, racist, discriminatory and simplistic by experts, politicians and community leaders. B, a Somalia-born man, Hassan Khalif Shah Ali, 30, reportedly radicalised but delusional and mentally unstable, fatally stabbed restaurateur Sisto Malaspina and injured others before he was killed by police. C, Mr. Morrison blamed the attack on, and I quote, radical, violent, extremist Islam, end quote, saying, quote, here in Australia we wouldn't be kidding ourselves if we did not call out the fact that the greatest threat of religious extremism in this country is a radical and dangerous ideology of extremist Islam, end quote. D, Mr. Morrison has called on the Muslim community to do more and was supported by his Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton saying, quote, let's be real, we need people to do more and certainly that's what we would expect from the Islamic community, end quote. E, terrorism expert and lawyers have criticised the Prime Minister for his attack on the Muslim community. F, counter-terrorism expert and now a Labor MP, Dr. Anne Ali, said the Prime Minister's response to the events in Melbourne was ignorant, and I quote, politically desperate, end quote, and that Mr. Morrison's need to do and I quote, a little bit of terrorism 101 and know what he's talking about before he starts dividing communities, end quote. G, the National President of the Australian Lawyers Alliance, Greg Barnes, said that the comments from Mr. Dutton and Mr. Morrison were, and I quote, scapegoating, racist and simplistic, end quote, since attackers rarely interact with Islamic leaders nor regularly attend mosques. H, Professor Gillian Triggs, the former president of the Human Rights Commission, has criticised the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, for his response to the Burke Street attack and his dismissive attitude to mental illness, calling him, quote, foolish and, another quote, unhelpful. I, terrorism expert Professor Greg Barton, said that many older Islamic leaders were unlikely to spot extremism. I and J, Australia's Grand Mufti, Dr. Ibrahim Abu Mohammed, said that the comments by Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Home Affairs Peter Dutton constituted, and I quote, serious discrimination, end quote, against Australians of Muslim community. K, Australian Federation of Islamic Council's President Dr. Ratib Junaid, in writing to Mr. Morrison, said that it was, and I quote, insulting and offensive, end quote, to suggest any Islamic leaders were withholding information that was vital to national security. I, the Australian National Imams Council, ANIC, expressed outrage at Prime Minister Scott Morrison's connecting Islam to, and I quote, radical and dangerous ideology, end quote, expressing its disappointment that in such difficult times and during a national tragedy, when all Australians of all faiths and backgrounds should be called upon to unite and stand together against any form of extremism and violence, to see our nation's leaders politicising this incident and using it for political gain. And M, ANIC called upon the Prime Minister and his government and all political leaders to be more responsible in their rhetoric in order not to cast aspersions on a segment of the community based on the actions of one deranged individual, and to act in the best interest of the Australian people by calling for unity, solidarity, rather than alienating any group of Australians. 2, that this House notes that the Muslim Australian community have strongly condemned the criminal act perpetrated by a deranged individual, and they continue to condemn all forms of violent extremism. And 3, that this House notes the community's strong condemnation of Prime Minister Scott Morrison's divisive, polarising behaviour and politicising of the incident, and for his abuse of office and his reported anti-Muslim views.
Mr. David Shoebridge.